You drink it every single day. You think it's a simple comfort, a morning ritual, or a harmless habit. But almost everything you know about coffee and tea is a lie. A lie constructed by centuries of marketing, religious paranoia, and imperial greed. We are breaking down 60 myths that history, science, and snobs have used to manipulate what's in your cup. By the end of this video, you'll realize you aren't drinking tradition, you're drinking propaganda. 1. The Boston Tea Party. Tax myth. You have been taught that the Boston Tea Party was a heroic revolt against sky-high taxes, but the economics behind it are actually hilarious. The Patriots did not dump the tea because it was too expensive. They dumped it because the British government had made it too cheap. The Tea Act of 1773 allowed the East India Company to undercut the price of smuggled Dutch tea. This terrified wealthy American smugglers like John Hancock, who were running massive black market operations. The protest was about liberty, sure, but it was also a convenient riot organized by businessmen angry that a corporate price cut was about to destroy their illegal profit margins. 2. Espresso beans don't exist. If you buy bags labeled espresso beans, thinking they are a special high-octane species of coffee, you are falling for a supermarket scam. There is no such thing as an espresso bean in botany. It is the exact same Arabica bean found in the regular bag next to it. Espresso refers to the method of brewing, forcing pressurized hot water through fine grounds, not the type of plant. Roasters use the label simply to indicate the beans are dark enough to taste consistent under pressure. You can technically put espresso beans in a regular drip machine, and nothing bad will happen. You are buying a brewing suggestion, not a different species. 3. You probably think the woman who sued McDonald's over hot coffee was just greedy, but this is a corporate lie that ruined a victim's reputation. Stella Liebeck wasn't driving. She was parked when the coffee spilled. It wasn't just hot, it was served at nearly 190 degrees. A temperature that instantly fuses skin to fabric. She suffered third-degree burns, needed skin grafts, and nearly died. She initially only asked for her medical bills to be covered. McDonald's refused and launched a PR campaign to make her look ridiculous. You believe she's the villain because a billion-dollar corporation successfully convinced you that expecting safe coffee makes you the problem. 4. Believing that a dark, bitter French roast gives you a stronger energy kick is a chemical misunderstanding. Your tongue thinks it is stronger because of the bold, smoky taste, but your bloodstream completely disagrees. Roasting is a cooking process, and the longer you cook the beans, the more mass they lose. While caffeine is stable, a scoop of light roast beans is denser and contains more actual coffee material than a scoop of puffy, air-filled dark roast beans. So, the strongest tasting coffee is often the weakest one in terms of keeping you awake. You are trading actual caffeine for the illusion of strength. 5. Sticking your pinky finger out while holding a teacup is not a sign of high-class aristocracy. It is actually socially read as being a pretentious amateur. Modern etiquette experts agree that this gesture is considered unnecessary and rude. The habit likely started back when tea was drunk from small porcelain bowls without handles, requiring guests to balance the cup with 3 fingers, while the pinky acted as a counterweight. However, doing this with a handled cup today implies that you think you are better than everyone else. If you dine with royalty and stick your pinky out, you are not being fancy, you are just trying too hard. 6. For over a decade, the pumpkin spice latte was a lie in a cup because it contained absolutely no actual pumpkin. When the drink launched, it was purely a chemical cocktail of cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove flavorings designed to mimic the smell of a pie, not the taste of a squash. It wasn't until 2015, after years of public complaints, that Starbucks finally added a tiny amount of real pumpkin puree to the recipe. Before that, millions of people were sipping on sugar and spices while convincing themselves they were enjoying a vegetable. You weren't drinking a harvest tradition, you were drinking a candle scent. 7. The legend of Kaldi the goat herd is the most famous story in coffee history, but historians suspect it is more fiction than fact. You know the tale. A humble Ethiopian shepherd sees his goats dancing after eating magic red berries and accidentally invents the morning brew. However, this story does not appear in writing until 1671, which is over 8 centuries after it supposedly happened. It reads less like history and more like a clever origin myth created to give the drink a mystical backstory. The reality is likely more practical. Indigenous tribes were probably eating the beans as high-caffeine energy snacks for warfare long before anyone brewed a pot. 8. When you see 100% Arabica plastered on a bag of cheap gas station coffee, you assume it signifies high quality, but it is actually a meaningless marketing fluff. Arabica is simply the species of the plant, not a grade of excellence. It is the equivalent of a frozen burger box proudly stating 100% beef. That beef could be a premium steak, or it could be the lowest grade of industrial scrap. Just because the coffee is Arabica doesn't mean it was grown well, picked ripe, or roasted correctly. You can have 100% Arabica that tastes like burning rubber. It is a biological fact, not a promise of flavor. 9. The idea that drinking coffee will stunt your growth is not medical science. It is pure marketing propaganda from the early 20th century. This myth was almost entirely manufactured by a man named C.W. Post, who was trying to sell a grain-based coffee substitute called Postum. He launched a massive smear campaign calling coffee a nerve poison that would make children fail in school and stop growing, solely to scare parents into buying his roasted wheat beverage. There is absolutely no scientific evidence linking caffeine consumption to bone growth or height. If you are short, do not blame the latte. Blame your genetics and C.W. Post's lies. 10. Coffee snobs often claim that using boiling water will burn the coffee, but this is thermodynamically impossible. Coffee beans are roasted at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Pouring 212-degree water onto them cannot physically burn a substance that has already survived an inferno. While boiling water might extract bitter compounds faster if your beans are low quality or the roast is too dark, it is not burning the grounds. In fact, for lighter roasts, you actually need near boiling water to extract the proper acidity and sweetness. If your coffee tastes like ash, it is because you bought bad beans, not because your water was 2 degrees too hot. 11. Your mother probably told you that slurping tea is rude, but she was ignoring the physics and culture of half the planet. In many Asian cultures, specifically Japan and China, slurping is acceptable and even considered a compliment to the chef. When you slurp, you are aspirating the liquid, mixing it with oxygen, which expands the aromatic profile, allowing you to taste flavors that would otherwise remain hidden. It also cools the hot tea down instantly as it hits your tongue. So, while Victorian etiquette guides say you should be silent, a loud slurp tells the host that the tea is so good you want to taste every single molecule. 12. You probably think Nescafé or some giant chemical corporation invented instant coffee in the 1950s. But the man who successfully commercialized it had the most patriotic name imaginable: George Washington. No, not the president. George Constant Washington, a Belgian inventor living in Guatemala in 1906. He noticed dried coffee residue on a silver pot and realized he could mass-produce it for convenience. He launched Red E coffee, which became a staple for soldiers in World War I. The soldiers called it a cup of George. It proved that Americans have always cared more about speed and caffeine delivery than actual flavor. 13. We assume coffee has always been a beverage, but for the majority of its existence, it was actually a solid food. Long before anyone figured out how to roast and brew the seeds, indigenous tribes in East Africa were crushing the coffee cherries and mixing them with animal fat. They rolled this mixture into dense, high-caffeine energy balls that served as portable rations during long journeys or tribal warfare. It wasn't a comforting morning ritual. It was a primitive performance-enhancing drug designed for survival. If you really want to consume coffee the traditional way, you should stop drinking it and start chewing on it like a protein bar. 14. The term orange pekoe on a box of tea bags is one of the most confusing labels in the grocery store because it has absolutely nothing to do with oranges. Consumers buy it expecting a citrusy, fruity flavor, only to be disappointed by a standard black tea taste. The word orange in this context is a historical reference to the Dutch House of Orange-Nassau, the royal family involved in the early tea trade. It was a marketing tag used to suggest the tea was royal quality. Pekoe refers to the leaf size, so when you buy it, you are buying a leaf grade with a Dutch name, not a fruit drink. 15. Social media influencers love to push expensive detox teas that promise to cleanse your system and melt fat. But medically speaking, these teas are not cleaning anything. They are just emptying you out. Most of these blends rely on an ingredient called senna, which is an FDA-approved non-prescription laxative. You are not experiencing a miraculous release of toxins from your liver. You are experiencing the biological effects of a bowel irritant. Your liver and kidneys are already the only detox system you need. Drinking these teas does not make you healthier. It just makes you dehydrated and forces you to spend your entire day in the bathroom. 16. Storing your coffee beans in the freezer to keep them fresh is a classic life hack that usually ends up destroying the flavor. The problem is condensation. Coffee beans are porous sponges that absorb moisture and odors. Every time you take the big bag out of the freezer and open it, warm air hits the frozen beans, creating moisture that accelerates spoilage. Unless you portion the beans out into single-use airtight containers, you are damaging the roast every morning. Plus, if the bag isn't perfectly sealed, your expensive Ethiopian roast will start absorbing the aromas of the frozen fish sticks and leftover lasagna sitting next to it. 17. Putting milk into your teacup before the hot water was originally a sign of economic class, not just a culinary preference. In historical Britain, this habit was associated with protecting cheaper dishware. Wealthy aristocrats owned fine bone china that could withstand the thermal shock of boiling water, so they poured the tea first. The working class, however, often used cheaper clay mugs that would crack or shatter if boiling water hit them directly. So they had to pour cold milk in first to lower the temperature. If you pour milk first today, you are historically protecting your mugs, not necessarily improving the flavor. 18. The tea bag is a perfect example of an invention that was never supposed to exist, born entirely from customer confusion. In 1908, a New York merchant named Thomas Sullivan was trying to save money by sending tea samples to customers in small silk pouches instead of expensive metal tins. He intended for people to cut the pouches open and pour out the loose leaves, but his American customers were too impatient to figure that out. They simply dunked the whole silk bag into the boiling water and raved about the convenience. Sullivan was horrified they were ruining his tea, but eventually gave in to the demand. 19. We tend to think of English breakfast tea as an ancient, homegrown British tradition that dates back to the dawn of the empire. But the blend is actually a relatively modern invention, and it likely didn't even start in England. One strong historical theory traces it to a tea merchant in New York City in the 1840s named Richard Davies. He created a strong black blend to cut through the heavy, greasy breakfasts of the time. It wasn't until much later that Queen Victoria tried it in Scotland and popularized it. You are drinking a marketing concept, not a medieval royal recipe. 20. Ordering a chai tea at a coffee shop is the ultimate linguistic redundancy that makes linguists cringe. In Hindi and many other languages derived from the word cha, the word chai literally just means tea. So when you look at a menu and say, "I would like a chai tea, please," you are looking the barista in the eye and saying, "I would like a tea tea, please." The spiced drink you are actually looking for is properly called masala chai, which means spiced tea. Using the full name makes you sound like a connoisseur. Saying chai tea just makes you sound like you really love repetition. 21. Ordering a double espresso because you need the ultimate caffeine fix is actually a mathematical error. Because of its concentrated flavor and reputation, we assume espresso is the king of caffeine. However, on a drink-by-drink basis, a standard 12-ounce cup of drip coffee contains significantly more caffeine than a shot of espresso. Espresso has more caffeine per ounce, but nobody drinks a full cup of espresso unless they have a death wish. A regular mug of filtered coffee exposes the grounds to water for much longer, extracting more of the stimulant. So that weak-looking diner coffee is actually the high-octane fuel you need, while the espresso is just a quick, flavorful jolt. 22. The trivia fact that tea contains more caffeine than coffee is one of those technical truths that is practically a lie. If you look at the dry leaves versus the dry beans, yes, tea leaves have a higher percentage of caffeine by weight. But unless you plan on eating a spoonful of dry dust, this doesn't matter. You use far fewer grams of tea leaves to brew a cup than you do coffee grounds. Once the water is added and the drink is in your hand, a standard cup of coffee has about 3 times the caffeine punch of a standard cup of tea. Do not switch to Earl Grey expecting a boost. 23. Using a saucer merely to catch drips or hold your spoon is a modern invention that completely ignores its original mechanical purpose. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the saucer was actually a cooling device. The coffee or tea was served at near boiling temperatures. So people would deliberately pour the liquid from the cup into the deep saucer to increase the surface area and cool it down instantly. They would then slurp the drink directly from the saucer, not the cup. If you did this today in a Starbucks, you would look insane. But 200 years ago, drinking from the cup while it was still boiling hot was considered barbaric. 24. The statistic that coffee is the second most traded commodity in the world after oil is a lie that has been repeated by business gurus for decades. You will hear this fact in documentaries and marketing brochures to make the coffee industry sound like a global titan. However, there is absolutely no data to support it. While coffee is definitely popular, it does not even crack the top tier of global trade value when compared to actual giants like natural gas, gold, copper, or even soybeans. This myth likely started from a misquoted report in the 1970s and just refused to die. Your morning brew is important, but it isn't beating gold. 25. There is a famous myth that the Catholic Church tried to ban coffee as a Muslim invention until the Pope saved it. The story claims Pope Clement VIII tasted the devil's drink, loved it, and baptized the beans to make them safe for Catholics. It is a charming story of religious tolerance, but historians have found zero evidence it actually happened. There are no official papal records or decrees mentioning this event. It is likely a legend invented later to justify why Christian Europe fell so deeply in love with a drink that came from the Islamic world. The church didn't bless coffee. The economy simply made it too profitable to ignore. 26. If you order a caramel macchiato expecting a traditional Italian coffee experience, you are actually ordering a sugar milkshake with a stolen name. In Italian, macchiato literally means marked or stained. The original drink is a simple shot of espresso marked with a tiny dollop of milk foam to soften the bitterness. It is a small, strong 2-ounce drink. The 20-ounce bucket of vanilla syrup and hot milk you get at chain coffee shops is essentially a reversed latte. They hijacked a sophisticated Italian word to sell you a liquid dessert. If you ordered a real macchiato in Rome, you would be shocked by how small and bitter your treat actually is. 27. You have been warned for years that coffee dehydrates you, but this is a physiological myth that refuses to die. While caffeine is indeed a mild diuretic, which means it makes your kidneys process fluid a bit faster, the effect is so weak that it does not offset the giant cup of water you are drinking with it. Science shows that if you are a regular drinker, your body builds a tolerance to the diuretic effect almost immediately. You would have to consume a dangerous amount of caffeine pills without any liquid to actually dehydrate yourself. So that morning pot of coffee counts toward your hydration goals, regardless of what the internet says. 28. Coffee snobs obsess over the bloom, that moment when hot water hits the grounds and the coffee puffs up and bubbles. They treat it like a magical release of flavor, but chemically, it is just a burp. The bubbles are simply carbon dioxide escaping from the beans. While a good bloom indicates that your coffee is fresh, because stale beans lose their gas, the bloom itself is not a flavor profile. It is a waste product of the roasting process leaving the building. If your coffee doesn't bubble, it is definitely stale. But watching the bubbles isn't a culinary experience. It's just watching gas evaporate from a seed. 29. If you use the term high tea to sound sophisticated and fancy, you are actually doing the exact opposite. Millions of tourists and hotels use this phrase to describe delicate sandwiches and scones. But this is a massive linguistic embarrassment. In the 19th century, high tea was actually a gritty working-class meal served at a high dining table for starving laborers coming home from factories. It consisted of heavy meats, baked beans, and strong tea. The posh ritual you are imagining with fine china and lace napkins is actually called low tea, or afternoon tea. So if you invite a historian to high tea, do not be surprised if they expect sausages. 30. The modern trend of putting butter and oil in your coffee to hack your brain is often sold as ancient wisdom from the Himalayas. While it is true that Tibetans drink tea with yak butter, they do it for survival calories in a freezing high-altitude climate, not to optimize their startup productivity. The modern bulletproof version is a marketing invention designed to sell you expensive oil supplements. Scientifically, dumping 500 calories of saturated fat into your morning drink isn't a magic cognitive switch. It is just a very heavy breakfast. You aren't tapping into ancient monk secrets. You are just drinking a greasy, high-calorie keto milkshake. 31. The British like to pretend that tea drinking is an ancient homegrown Anglo-Saxon tradition, but they actually stole the habit from a Portuguese princess. Before 1662, England was a nation of ale drinkers, and tea was just an expensive medicinal curiosity. It wasn't until King Charles II married Catherine of Braganza that things changed. She arrived in England, asked for a cup of tea, and was horrified when they offered her warm beer instead. She brought her own tea chests and established the ritual of drinking it daily at court. The desperate British aristocracy, wanting to be like the cool new queen, immediately copied her, turning a Portuguese custom into a British national identity. 32. Ordering a French roast coffee because you think it sounds sophisticated is a culinary mistake. The term does not refer to beans grown in France or a special Parisian technique. It is simply a code word for burning the beans until they are charcoal. Historically, roasting coffee this dark was a trick used by merchants to hide the taste of defective or low-quality beans. By burning off all the nuanced flavors, you can make trash taste uniform. So when you buy a bag of oily, black French roast, you are likely paying a premium for a roaster's attempt to cover up a bad product with smoke and ash. 33. Drinking green tea will not magically melt your belly fat, no matter what the influencers and supplement bottles tell you. The myth claims that green tea creates a furnace in your metabolism that incinerates calories without you doing any work. While green tea does contain catechins that can technically boost metabolic rate, the effect is microscopic. Studies show you would need to drink an impossible amount of tea, something like 7 to 10 cups a day, just to burn fewer calories than you would get from half a cookie. It is a healthy beverage with antioxidants, but treating it like a liquid gym workout is just a way to sell you overpriced pills. 34. You have likely been brewing tea wrong your entire life by thinking every bag needs boiling water. While sturdy black teas can handle 212-degree water, delicate green and white teas are instantly ruined by it. Pouring boiling water onto green tea leaves cooks them, releasing tannins that make the drink taste bitter, grassy, and astringent. If you think you hate green tea, you probably just hate burnt tea. The proper way to brew these delicate leaves is with cooler water, around 175 degrees. You aren't supposed to endure a bitter health drink. You are supposed to enjoy a sweet one, but your kettle is destroying the flavor before you even take a sip. 35. We often believe the French press is the quintessential French invention, but the Patent Office tells a different story of Italian ingenuity. While the French did use primitive metal screens to press coffee in the 1800s, the device was terrible and often leaked grounds into the cup. The elegant functional design we use today, with a tight rubber seal and spring, was actually patented by an Italian designer named Attilio Calimani in 1929. The French may have started the idea, but the Italians perfected the engineering. So calling it a French press is a bit like crediting the Wright brothers for the fighter jet. They had the concept, but someone else built the machine. 36. Believing that the Fair Trade sticker on your coffee bag guarantees a wealthy, happy farmer is a comforting lie we tell ourselves in the grocery aisle. While the certification is better than nothing, the fair price is often just a bare minimum floor that barely covers the rising cost of production. It protects farmers from total market collapse, but it rarely lifts them out of poverty. Most of the premium price you pay for that ethical sticker stays with the roaster and the retailer, not the grower. You are buying a guilt-free conscience for yourself. But you are not necessarily funding a thriving future for the person who actually grew the beans. 37. Your history teacher might have told you that the famous explorer Sir Walter Raleigh brought tea to England, but this is a complete fabrication. Raleigh was an adventurer who brought back tobacco and potatoes, but he never mentioned tea in his journals, and he likely never even tasted it. The true heroes of the European tea trade were the Dutch, who were importing it to the continent, while the British were still obsessed with ale. Raleigh died in 1618, decades before tea became a common commodity in London. Giving him credit for your Earl Grey is like giving Benjamin Franklin credit for the internet just because he discovered electricity. 38. If you buy breakfast blend coffee thinking it is formulated to give you a massive jolt of energy to start the day, you are falling for branding over botany. The name implies high-octane fuel, but in the coffee industry, breakfast blend almost always refers to a light to medium roast with a mild, acidic flavor profile. It is designed to be palatable and easy to drink first thing in the morning, not to be chemically stronger. In fact, many breakfast blends are watery and thin compared to other roasts. You aren't buying a power tool for your brain. You are buying the coffee equivalent of a gentle tap on the shoulder. 39. The dangerous belief that a strong cup of black coffee will sober you up after a night of drinking is a movie trope that might actually get you killed. Biologically, caffeine does absolutely nothing to lower your blood alcohol concentration or help your liver process toxins. All it does is block the adenosine receptors that tell your brain you are tired. The result is a terrifying state doctors call being a wide-awake drunk. You still have the poor judgment and slow reaction times of an intoxicated person, but now you have the false energy to try driving a car. Coffee does not cure drunkenness. It just makes you an energetic idiot. 40. People often avoid coffee because they claim it is too acidic for their stomachs, but this is chemically incorrect. In terms of pH levels, black coffee is actually less acidic than orange juice, beer, or even a can of Coca-Cola. The reason coffee gives you heartburn is not the acid in the liquid. It is the caffeine. Caffeine relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter, the valve that keeps your stomach acid down. When that valve relaxes, your own stomach acid splashes up. So blaming the coffee bean for the acid burn is unfair. The coffee is just the key that unlocked the door to your own stomach problems. 41. The name cappuccino has absolutely nothing to do with the capuchin monkey, even though the visual resemblance is funny. The monkey and the coffee are actually cousins in etymology, both named after the Capuchin friars, a violently austere order of monks founded in the 16th century. These monks wore distinctively brown hooded robes. When the Italians invented a drink mixing coffee with milk, the resulting light brown color reminded them of the monks' robes. So they named it cappuccino, which translates to little hood. The monkey was named later for the same reason. So when you drink a cappuccino, you are technically drinking a little monk, not a little monkey. 42. A persistent Civil War myth claims that Union soldiers carried carbine rifles with coffee grinders built into the stock, but this is largely a collector's exaggeration. While a few Sharp's coffee mill carbines do exist, they were never standard issue for the Army. Historians believe less than 100 were likely made, and many examples in museums are fakes created by mechanics after the war to sell to gullible tourists. Grinding brittle beans inside a rifle stock would likely compromise the weapon's structure, making it a terrible gun and an even worse kitchen appliance. You are looking at a novelty item, not a standard military tool. 43. We tend to imagine historical coffee houses as polite, dignified places for quiet study. But in the 17th century, they were basically chaos dungeons. They were known as penny universities, because you could enter for a penny, but they were not libraries. They were smoky, rowdy dens of political sedition, where people shouted news, spread conspiracy theories, and plotted against the government. They were so disruptive that King Charles II of England tried to ban them in 1675, claiming they were places where lazy persons spread lies about his conduct. If you think your local coffee shop is loud, be thankful you are not in a London coffee house in 1670. 44. Paying hundreds of dollars for Kopi Luwak or Civet Cat coffee because you think it is a luxury product is the ultimate scam of the coffee industry. The marketing story claims that wild civets in Indonesia naturally select only the ripest, sweetest cherries. In reality, most of this coffee now comes from cruel battery cage farms, where stressed, malnourished animals are force-fed low-quality berries until they get sick. The resulting coffee does not taste better because of magic enzymes. It usually tastes flat and thin because the animals are unhealthy. You are not buying a gourmet delicacy. You are buying an unethical souvenir that tastes like animal abuse. 45. Ordering decaf coffee does not mean you are drinking a caffeine-free beverage. Despite what the bright orange labels imply, the process of decaffeination is not perfect. It typically removes about 97% of the stimulant, which sounds like a lot, but it is not 100%. A standard cup of decaf still contains anywhere from 2 to 7 milligrams of caffeine. While this won't make you run a marathon, it adds up. If you drink 5 cups of decaf throughout the day thinking it is just flavored water, you are actually ingesting the same amount of caffeine as a regular espresso shot. You cannot cheat the bean completely. 46. You might believe that white tea comes from a rare, mystical species of plant found only on snowy mountain peaks, but botanically, it is exactly the same plant as the black tea in a cheap diner bag. All true tea comes from the Camellia sinensis bush. The only difference is the processing. White tea is simply the young leaves plucked early and dried immediately to prevent oxidation. Black tea is the same leaf just allowed to rot and ferment longer. You are not paying for a different species. You are paying for a younger leaf that didn't get to grow up. It is the veal of the tea world. 47. When you order a cafe Americano, you are not ordering a sophisticated Italian recipe. You are historically ordering an insult. During World War II, American soldiers stationed in Italy found the local espresso to be way too strong, bitter, and tiny for their tastes. They begged the local baristas to water it down to resemble the large, tasteless cups of joe they drank back home. The Italian baristas were disgusted by this request and mockingly called the watery soup Caffè Americano, or American coffee. Every time you pay $5 for one today, you are paying for a drink that was invented to mock your grandfather's bad taste palate. 48. We say that money doesn't grow on trees, but for centuries in parts of Asia and Siberia, money literally grew on tea bushes. Tea bricks, blocks of tea leaves compressed with ox blood or flour into solid slabs, were used as hard currency long before coins or paper money became reliable in those regions. You could buy a horse, land, or pay your taxes with bricks of tea. In fact, tea bricks were considered better than gold because if the economy collapsed, you couldn't eat gold, but you could shave a piece off your bank account and boil it for soup. It was the ultimate edible cryptocurrency. 49. We think of tea as a polite British tradition, but the industry was built on a crime that makes James Bond look like an amateur. For centuries, China held a strict monopoly on tea. Britain was desperate to grow its own in India, so they hired a botanist named Robert Fortune for a massive corporate espionage mission. He shaved his head, wore a fake ponytail, and disguised himself as a Chinese merchant to infiltrate forbidden territories. He didn't just take notes, he stole thousands of tea plants and seeds. Your cup of Earl Grey exists only because of the most successful agricultural theft in human history. 50. When you order a mocha, assuming the name comes from chocolate, you are ignoring geography in favor of syrup. The term mocha originally had nothing to do with cocoa or chocolate sauce. It was the name of the major port city in Yemen, Al-Makka, which dominated the world coffee trade from the 15th to the 18th century. The beans exported from this specific port were famous for having a natural, earthy, chocolate-like undertone. Over centuries, Europeans forgot about the city in Yemen and started using the word mocha as a synonym for chocolate and coffee mixed together. Your sugary drink is named after a dusty port city. 51. You probably add sugar to your coffee to get an extra burst of energy, but biologically, you are sabotaging the very kick you are looking for. While the caffeine blocks your tired signals, the sugar causes a rapid glucose spike, followed by a massive insulin crash. This sugar crash often hits right when the caffeine is supposed to be peaking, leading to the jittery, anxious feeling people often blame on the coffee itself. The energy you feel from a sugary latte is actually a chaotic war between a stimulant and a depressant happening in your blood. If you want the real clean energy of the bean, you have to drink it black. 52. If you see someone putting salt in their coffee, you might think they are playing a prank or have lost their mind, but they are actually using advanced culinary chemistry. Sodium is chemically better at blocking bitter receptors on the tongue than sugar is. A tiny pinch of salt binds to the taste buds that detect bitterness, suppressing them and allowing the natural sweetness of the bean to shine through. This is why cheap, bitter diner coffee tastes surprisingly drinkable if you add a few grains of salt. It isn't a weird habit. It is a molecular hack to fix bad roasting. 53. You likely think the little plastic circle on your coffee bag is a freshness scratch and sniff sticker designed for your smelling pleasure. It is not. That is a one-way degassing valve. Freshly roasted coffee releases massive amounts of carbon dioxide gas. If that valve wasn't there to let the gas escape, the bag would inflate like a balloon and explode in the back of the delivery truck. While squeezing the bag to smell the aroma is a nice bonus for the customer, the valve's true purpose is purely industrial safety to prevent coffee grenades. You are sniffing a safety exhaust pipe, not a perfume sampler. 54. People often drink Earl Grey tea before bed because they think its floral, citrusy aroma is soothing and herbal. This is a sleep-destroying mistake. Earl Grey is not a herbal tea. It is a fully oxidized black tea that has simply been sprayed with bergamot oil. It contains just as much caffeine as a strong breakfast blend. The soothing smell tricks your brain into thinking relaxation, but the chemistry is screaming, "Wake up!" If you drink this at 9 p.m., you are ingesting a stimulant disguised as a spa treatment. Stick to chamomile if you actually want to sleep. 55. There is a patriotic myth that Benjamin Franklin discovered coffee or was the coffee king of early America. While Franklin was indeed a fan of coffee houses for their political gossip, he did not introduce the drink to the colonies. The Dutch had brought coffee to New Amsterdam, which became New York, decades before Franklin was even born. In fact, Franklin spent far more time trying to convince Americans to use rhubarb and other weird plants than he did promoting coffee. He was a caffeine consumer, not a pioneer. Crediting him with coffee is just another way we try to paste his face on everything in history. 56. The single origin label on a bag of coffee is often sold as a guarantee of elite quality, but this is a geographical trap. Single origin simply means the beans came from one country, like Brazil or Colombia. It does not mean they came from a single farm or a specific hill. That bag could contain a mix of beans from 50 different industrial farms across a massive country, all blended together in a giant silo. You can have single origin coffee that is absolute trash. Unless the bag names the specific farm or region, you are buying a country's average, not a farmer's masterpiece. 57. The biggest lie about coffee is the one your doctor might have told you 20 years ago, that it causes heart disease. This myth comes from flawed studies in the 1970s that noticed coffee drinkers had more heart attacks. However, the researchers forgot to adjust for one massive variable. In the 70s, almost everyone who drank coffee also smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. The cigarettes were killing them, not the coffee. Modern science has vindicated the bean, showing that regular coffee consumption is actually linked to a lower risk of heart failure and stroke. The danger wasn't the cup. It was the ashtray next to it. 58. We think of coffee as a seed we grind, but we throw away the most nutritious part of the plant. The coffee cherry, the fruit that surrounds the bean, is usually discarded as waste or fertilizer. However, this dried fruit can be milled into coffee flour. It is gluten-free, high in fiber, iron, and potassium. And it tastes nothing like coffee. It has a floral, citrusy, roasted fruit flavor. We are currently throwing away millions of tons of superfood every year just to get to the seed inside. You aren't just wasting food, you are ignoring half the harvest. 59. You probably call your plunger pot a Bodum, or assume the Danish company Bodum invented it because they are the most famous brand. This is a triumph of marketing over invention. Bodum did not invent the French press. They simply popularized a design that had been around for decades. The original patents belonged to Italians like Attilio Calimani and later modifications by the Swiss. Bodum just came along in the 1970s, made it look cool, and sold it to yuppies. Crediting Bodum with the invention is like crediting Apple with inventing the MP3 player. They didn't make the first one, they just made the one you wanted to buy. 60. You tell yourself you love the taste of coffee, but if you get a headache when you skip a day, you aren't a connoisseur, you are a drug addict. Caffeine physically alters your brain chemistry by mimicking a neurotransmitter called adenosine. Your brain actually grows more adenosine receptors to compensate for the caffeine blocking them. When you stop drinking it, those extra receptors get flooded, causing massive blood flow changes that result in the throbbing withdrawal headache. That isn't tiredness leaving your body, it is a physical dependency screaming for a fix. You are a functional user. Welcome to the club. That cup in your hand isn't culture, it's just 60 layers of marketing you swallowed without question. Now be honest. Which myth did you actually believe? Did you think espresso was a special bean? Did you think pinky out was fancy? Don't justify it. Just admit the lie in the comments below. If you're tired of history making you look foolish, hit subscribe and share this video. You are watching Lie Buster, and if you think coffee is the only thing lying to you, click this video right now. The food industry is way worse, and I'm about to ruin your lunch too.